Ciao, I'm Christine Hickman, author of Gnocchi Solo Gnocchi, a cookbook dedicated to all the different types of gnocchi made in Italy, which includes potato, cheese, bread-based cannelli, semolina, both savory and sweet, and all the various methods of preparation. Gnocchi Solo Gnocchi also celebrates my more than 25 years of living part-time in Italy, my Italian cuisine teaching career, and my passion for one of Italy's favorite first courses. And to those of you who haven't yet purchased the book, look for it on my website, www.sonomarcella.com. Today, I'm going to demonstrate the important tricks of making and shaping potato gnocchi, the most difficult of all the gnocchi varieties to make successfully. You can apply these techniques to other gnocchi recipes as well, and with a bit of practice, you'll feel confident with the results. The most important thing about making gnocchi is your choice of potato. I always use Yukon Golds or any kind of a yellow potato that is available in the United States. I do not and will never use russet potatoes, which most American cooks do use, because they are more granular and they do not have the flavor that the potato that the Italians use to make their gnocchi in Italy. This is the one that I use. It's the Yukon Gold. You can see that is nice and yellow on the inside. I have some here that have already been peeled and cut in half. And it's also handy if you want to keep all the potatoes that you buy approximately the same size so they bake at the same time. These have been microwaved. I usually do that when I'm in a bit of a hurry. If not, I will bake them. But don't ever boil them, because one of the things that is really bad for gnocchi is extra water. So if you boil a potato, it's going to have extra water in it. The other important thing to do is once they're baked and while they're still hot, you cut them in half, and then you can peel them. I usually use a towel here to protect my hands when I peel, and a small knife. I will put the scraps in here for now. So peel them while they're still hot or warm. It helps release extra moisture. These potatoes are also very thin-skinned, and also that makes them easy to peel. All right, now that all my potatoes are peeled, next what we want to do is rice the potatoes. This is a potato ricer. There are two different tools that are possible to use. One is the potato ricer, and the other one is a food mill. I prefer the potato ricer because it's easier to handle. Food mill, actually, you can purchase and use it for a lot of other things. A potato ricer is only good for one thing. Anyway, what we do is put in a potato or two at a time. And squeeze. Now, I usually use a big bowl. The other thing you can use is just the surface that you're going to work on to shape your gnocchi. The reason I use a bowl is I will show you when I'm actually mixing up the dough. I find it easier to not overmix the dough. But as I said, you can do either one. The one thing you do not ever want to do when making gnocchi is to use a masher, and particularly not a Cuisinart. It will condense the dough, and that is also another thing that makes gummy gnocchi, is when the dough is too condensed. We're going to end up with a big mound of riced potatoes after this. All right, got the last little bit. And we're done. The next tool I like to use when I mix is a plastic dough scraper. It gets all around the bowl. You can see how it's easy to toss and mix like a cake. This is one of the reasons I prefer to use a bowl for mixing my gnocchi. Now that I have all the potatoes in there, what I want is a teaspoon of salt in a bowl, 1 large egg, and I beat the salt with the egg. The reason I do that is because I like the way the salt melts into the egg and then makes a more uniform mixture with the potato gnocchi dough itself. You can sprinkle the salt over the potatoes, but I prefer this method. Make a little bit of a well in the middle, pour in the egg, and again, Mix lightly, like making a cake. Cut it in. Don't mix around like you would with a spoon. Carefully cut it in till it's mostly evenly incorporated. This is 1.5 cups of flour. I add almost all of it. If I need more, it's here. I don't want to add too much to begin with because I can make gnocchi that's too gummy, and if it's too gummy, there's nothing you can do about it. You have to start over. And again, cut and fold, much like you were mixing a cake. And then once it's to this point, as you can see, kind of crumbly, I start to pull the dough together with my hands. Lightly. I don't want to squish too much. I don't want to knead the dough too much because again, it's going to activate the gluten and you will end up with a gummy gnocchi, and that's not what you want. As it comes together, I press down just a little bit. It should be nice and soft. And at this point, when it's pretty much held together, I toss it onto the board. Now I carefully pull the dough together. I don't really want to knead it too much because if I knead it too much, it's going to overwork the dough again. So it should just be enough to pull together. Little flour on my board. Now what I'm going to do is test it. Even after all these years of making gnocchi, and even all these years of making gnocchi that my friends in Italy have done, we always test the gnocchi. You can add more flour if you need to, if they fall apart, but you cannot take it out. So if it's not any good, you have to start over. Let's try just a couple little pieces here. I'm done with this. I'm going to switch to a metal one. Bench scraper. I don't have to be perfectly shaped for testing. Just anything like that will work. And let's see what we have. So I'm trying to make sure that they don't fall apart. That's what the test is really about. It'll only take a minute or two. I usually use a small pot to do this in. And they're done when they come to the surface, which will be soon. It usually takes about 2 or 3 minutes, especially in a small pot like this. I can see that they're holding together, which is what I'm looking for. I want to make sure they're holding together, not falling apart. If they are falling apart, I need to add more flour to the dough. That's the only way I can adjust it. If they are too gummy, there's nothing I can do about it. And you want the water not boiling really heavily. You want it just simmering. Here it comes. See them start to bob up? All right, that means they're done. All right, here we have one beautiful gnocco, which is singular for gnocchi. Now that we've tested the gnocchi and we know that the dough is good, what I do is divide it into pieces that are easily rollable into logs. And when you roll this out, use a very light touch. No, don't press down too much, because again, the idea is you don't want to condense the dough. If you condense the dough, you make gnocchi that is too tough. One of the other secrets. Again, just light pressure. Think of going down and out. until it's a little bigger than your little finger. You also want to form the dough immediately after you've made it. If you let it sit around, it will weep liquid, and that's another bad sign for the gnocchi dough. This is you can use a knife, or I always use a bench scraper because it's just easier. Cut them into pieces a little less than 1 inch long. And don't worry about them being looking exactly alike, because it's more fun to have gnocchi that really does look like it's handmade. Now at this point, I always use a gnocchi paddle. Not even Italians necessarily use gnocchi paddles. They often use a fork, they often use a grater. But I prefer a gnocchi paddle because the metal, or the tooth on here on the wood, holds the gnocchi better when I'm shaping it. If I use a fork, it slips. It's a matter of personal preference. The other thing is that you can simply leave them the way they are, or, as my gnocchi mama taught me, to just use your finger and flip them. Now the reason you do that is it makes a little hole in the middle which holds the sauce. If you do that on a plain surface, you end up with a plain, silky smooth outside. But if you do it with a gnocchi paddle, start from the top, put your thumb in there simply and roll it down like that. And there you have a gnocchi with a hole in the middle and ridges on the outside. Now when you're done with that and you have a pile of them, also on a floured board, you then want to put them on a parchment lined and flour sprinkled sheet. It's great fun to get a bunch of people together doing this. Next dinner party, give it a try. Again, a bench scraper. You don't want them piled up, you want them separate, or they will stick together. As I asked my gnocchi teacher, my gnocchi mama, how did she get so good at doing it? And she said, devi praticare, you must practice. So don't be upset if the first gnocchi that you make doesn't come out exactly the way you wanted it. Just practice a little. What you want to do when you're making gnocchi is make enough, or more, I should say, than you want. Because from that point, you can put it in the freezer. Freeze it like you would berries or something. Once it's all hard, you pack them tightly in some Ziploc bags. And when you want gnocchi, you grab it out of the freezer and cook it from its frozen state. And within a few minutes, you have dinner. The other thing, you don't have to worry about them all being equal size, because they are done when they rise to the surface. And again, they look more homemade. Another good sprinkling of flour. Almost done here. And there you have it. Your gnocchi's ready to cook. Here we have the formed gnocchi, and we're about to cook it. One of the most important things about cooking gnocchi is to have a very large pot of boiling water. If you don't, you cook too much gnocchi, it will stick together and go down to the bottom of the pot and you'll have a mess. So one thing to remember, a lot of water, at least 1 gallon, and about 1 tablespoon of salt per each gallon. It should taste like the sea. The other important thing is to have your water not vigorously boiling, but like a rolling boil. And then put the gnocchi in a little bit at a time. I'm going to cook about half of these at a time. Because the other important thing is that they need room to swim. They don't like to be too close together. So once I put them in, I usually spin the water a little bit to begin with, give them room, and wait for them to come to the surface, which usually takes 3 to 5 minutes. Now you can let them rest on the top of the boiling water as you prepare the rest of your ingredients. Now the sauce that we're going to have today is a simple marinara sauce. Most of you know what that is. It's a tomato-based sauce, very easy to make, very traditional for potato gnocchi. Here they're starting to come. I don't want too much sauce for my gnocchi. The Italian way is to have sauce with your gnocchi, not gnocchi with a lot of sauce. I like a large spoon, big round one with lots of holes in it. It's just easy to use. Anything with a hole in it will work, any kind of a strainer. And I like the bowl because I can toss the gnocchi. I don't like to stir them because then I can break them up. Drain them as they come up. A little bit of water sticking to them is fine. Almost done here. Large bowl works really well for this. As you can see, they're nicely coated and ready to dish up. Once they're done and sauced with your sauce of choice, you're ready to dish up. A little more back in here. Here we go. And buon appetito!